This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Housing alone will never solve homelessness, but community will. This is John Calloway, the Executive Director of Mission Waco. Welcome to It Takes a Village with Creekside Community Village, where we will discuss Mission Waco's newest project, Creekside Community Village, the most talked about neighborhood in Waco. This transformational development combines permanent, supportive housing with life-giving community engagement. I hope you'll join us along this journey as we hear from stakeholders involved in helping make this dream a reality. Welcome to It Takes a Village. Glad you're joining us today. I'm here with two great friends of mine, the Reverend Dr. Jimmy Dorrell, founder of Mission Waco and President Emeritus. He's got lots of fun titles around here. We also have Dusty Kirk, who is the founder of The Hangar, but is also the Mission Waco Creekside Community Village Chief Village Officer. He's got the coolest title of us all. Jimmy, let's start with you. Who are you, and why in the world are you here?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I love what's going on at Mission Waco, Mission World, and the synergy of what's happening right now. So I feel real privileged to be here today. The backstory is was my life for all those years, and the Creekside Community Village came all after that because of a certain need. And let me kind of tell you how that happened. I'd already retired, but as you know, we'd built the shelter because there were homeless people that had nowhere to go. I used to have mamas show up with their kids at my house and nowhere to put them. And the only shelter was in town only had 5 or 6 beds, and they would oftentimes, if a person had been drinking or had gotten into a little trouble, they wouldn't let them in. And so because of that, there were lots of people on the streets. And I had to do 3 funerals in 1 year. One man froze to death on the street. Another 2 were at church in the bridge with us one Sunday, and it was a cold day, and they left after that and found a boarded up house that the city had condemned, took the back board off and snuck in, and ended up sleeping there that night. But they had a candle which turned over in the middle of the night, and they burned to death. So those 2 issues made it not just seeing the guy on the corner. Now, these are friends and people I knew well. And so because of that, we created what we now call as My Brother's Keeper, the homeless shelter at Mission Waco. And that was a journey in itself. But it was simply an overnight shelter mostly because nobody had a place to sleep. And like a lot of those kind of shelters, there were so many more needs we couldn't meet. Even though we had the Myers Center for Urban Ministries, there was social services, and there's a lot of good things that happened in the day. But as far as 24-hour care, it just wasn't there. So as we kind of rocked along, I retired and would keep up with people because I still am at church in the bridge and see a lot of the homeless and poor. But one particular day, we heard the news that one of the old hotels where a lot of my people from Church in the Bridge stay. It was the lowest income hotel in town, which people don't think of them as the poor. They don't think of them as homeless, but a lot of them were in and out of the that hotel, motel, because they had no place they could afford. And some would stay all week. Many of them would stay 2 or 3 nights and move out. And there were like 7 or 8 of those in the vicinity of downtown. But as gentrification began to grow in Waco, and just want to mention what that is for those that don't know, it's not it's just a force. It's when cities begin to get economic development, things begin to change. Most everybody sees economic development as a positive thing because new buildings are going in and people are getting more tax dollars to fix the roads. And it's got a synergy about it that is just great for a city if your tax base is getting up there. However, there's a downside to it that people don't talk about it much. Not only does the housing costs go up generally because the middle class and more wealthy that have come into the city buy out a lot of those old places and then tear them down and build nicer places. Well, Oak Lodge was one of those hotels where right in the middle of town where a lot of my friends stayed. They came to church in the bridge, and they made the announcement that they were going to tear it down. Well, we were just frustrated because we had no options. And so I grabbed a couple of friends that I'd retired already from Mission Waco, and I asked them, I said, can we just drive around town and look around and see if there might be anything that we could take and redo and just figure out, we just get some of the people that are going to be on the streets. And so as it turns out, we couldn't find anything. There were some old abandoned buildings. There was some with asbestos, but the cost was prohibitive for everything we looked at. And then I remembered that I had been down to Austin to Community First Village, and it was Alan Graham, a friend. I'd kept up with him through the years, and stopped in one time and had blueprints all over his desk. And I asked him, I said, what in the world are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to build a gated community for the homeless. And I laughed at him because I thought he was kidding me. Well, it really wasn't kidding. It was just a different model of a gated community. Yeah. But he had come up with the idea. I don't know if he got it from anywhere else. I don't think so, because I think he was the first one out of the shelter there to start saying, we're going to do this particular community village. Alan says what we all say, and we understand. Those that work with the poor and the homeless understand. Homelessness is not about housing. It is important, but it's not the main deal. It's about community. It's the lack of healthy fellowship, usually bad backgrounds with family and other things, and then the dysfunctional relationship. So Alan knew that, and knew that the best thing to do would be create a settlement, a place that people could be around each other, a healthy environment, and go from there. So I went over and met with him, and then decided to take these couple of guys down there, and we went and said, we can do this. And so we got excited about it, and then through the next few months began to take local folks down from Waco, the mayor, some city council folks, some other folks, just to see the model and think if we could do that or not, because it would involve an amazing amount of cooperation among the community. So that's what we did, and we have gone on to the next steps that we'll talk about in a minute.
Well, it kind of just sounds like you just took the next step. And I think that's one of the stories that I can really appreciate about Mission Waco. One of the things I loved about Mission Waco is that while we have strategic initiatives and plans, and we do all those things and budgets and all the things we love to do, sort of, it was really just the next step. Yep. You live among folks that God's called you to serve. You identify a need, identify the assets in the community, connect the two. And if that next step is a addiction recovery facility and program, that's what you do.
That's right.
And so, as I've heard you kind of talk about forever is, the reason for starting MBK was one step. And this is, while it may be 20 years later, the next step is this sort of permanent supportive housing model. So thanks for sharing that. Dusty, how in the world did you get connected to all of this? What's your role? What's your background? Just tell us about Dusty.
Well, I served 30 years in the Air Force, and my family moved around a lot with me around the world, and supported me. And at the end of my 30-year career, my wife and I had a long discussion. And in the military, your family the term they use for them is dependents, and she didn't like to be called a dependent. So when I retired, I told her that now I was going to be her dependent and follow her calling and whatever it is she wanted to do in life. And that's kind of what led us to homelessness in the streets. She has a heart for it. She has a heart for people. She has a heart for people that are living marginalized. And so that's what's got us started. And my whole background is military, did not have any social services training, and we just started loving on people, and they loved back on us, and that's kind of how we learned it all.
And so you started the hangar what year?
You started the hangar in 2016.
Tell us a little bit about what the hangar is, what y'all do.
We were going to a small group study with Church Under the Bridge, under 17th Street Bridge. It was on Sundays after Church Under the Bridge service was over, and we were doing Jesus Calling Bible study with the homeless, and we realized at that time that we needed a place that a day shelter, if you will, but just a place where we could get out of the elements, have relationships, give people a place to do laundry, things like that. And so we started looking for a place, and that was right when Baylor was doing really good, and the city was growing. Magnolia came around, so the silos were blowing up the inner city. Gentrification was happening.
Yep.
We just couldn't find a place downtown that was not red tagged and overpriced. So, but we got lucky. We found an old Kwanzaa hut that kind of a strange building.
What is it? What is a Kwanzaa hut? Explain
Kwanzaa hut.
what
If
is
you've
that?
ever seen Gomer Pyle, that's what they live. That's the barracks. The Marine Corps barracks were
Okay.
Kwanzaa huts. It's an arch-shaped building made of metal that was used by the military, and there's a couple of them around Waco. Well, we got one of them. Converted it into a Kwanzaa-minium, and we are operating out of it, serving the homeless.
So one of the people that Jimmy was talking about that kind of formed this team, Dusty, was on that team because we knew that it's not just for folks who are staying that are sheltered, but it has to include chronic folks who are maybe in tents out on the streets. And while Mission Waco has some service to those individuals if they come to us at the Meyer Center, by and large, those folks that are in tents, Dusty is the main ministry that is serving those individuals, especially in the variety of parts of town, different parts of town in Waco. So, Jimmy, first question for you really is, why should we care for those who are in the unhoused population? Why should we care from both a city's perspective and a biblical perspective? Why should we care for these individuals?
Well, first and foremost for us, it was the biblical call to serve the poor. When you read the scripture and pay attention to it, a lot of times we don't. There are more verses about wealth and poverty than there is about heaven and hell. It's a major theme of the scripture. And so through the years, being with the poor themselves and reading more in the scriptures and getting motivated by people around the nation who were doing some really great things with the poor, this whole idea of how do we really not just go help those people, but build relationships with them. And a lot of times, I know churches have good hearts, but they don't know them. They want to help, but they go down and give stuff away and think that's helping, but it really isn't. And it's, again, I don't want to take away from the compassion behind their desire, but the helping process is so much more than that. So as we got to know the homeless, Janet and I, one morning, years and years ago, took 6 homeless guys that were sleeping under the bridge over to eat breakfast at Taco Cabana, and we paid for their breakfast and listened to their stories. And quite honestly, when I heard their background, had I grown up like them, I would have been homeless. So would most everybody listening to this podcast, because the horrible backgrounds, and then you add to those issues, mental health issues. You have addiction that comes almost always because of some kind of medication to deal with some of their mental health issues. And so it was the Matthew 25 people. These were the ones that Jesus said, when did I see you hungry or thirsty or in prison or in needing clothes or food? And you just can't read the scripture and not be convicted that this is the calling of all Christians at some level. Now, we don't all have to do what we're doing, the 3 of us. It doesn't have to be this part of it. That's who we're called to be, because we got to pay for it. We've got to find ways to get counseling. We've got to get some mental health issues and counselors. There's so many pieces to helping that other people have gifts for that we don't. And so as we recognize that we're kind of that bottom level of getting things started, and we knew the people and we listened to them. And so it really became out of the conviction of Scripture and then the practical reality that there was nowhere to go. Housing in Waco with gentrification was going out the roof. You couldn't buy a house even if you were lower income, not just homeless people, but and that's still going on. There's this sense across the nation. Homelessness is growing more and more in America right now because of the housing issue. And so it's only made the things worse. And so we had to do something that addressed as many of those that we could figure out to care for as possible. We're still not going to be able to get everybody in, but we'll have at least a start with a model that we think is effective.
So I think one of the things that's important for people who are listening to understand is we do what's called a point-in-time count as we receive federal funds. Many of us do in town. And so Waco has done the point-in-time count, I believe, since 2005 or 6. And around that time, we had, I think, a little over 600 individuals that were considered chronically homeless. That's sheltered, unsheltered. And then, we've been hovering around that 200 mark. So we've seen, a 55 to 60% decrease in their chronic homeless population. I think a lot of people think that it's a much bigger challenge or bigger issue because they see Portland on the news, they see Seattle, they see some of these bigger cities in Austin that have a significant homeless population, and they think that's Waco. And it's not. I think it's still a crisis, and it's still a crisis certainly for those individuals. But we did see in 2023 that number rose 25%. And it wasn't just Waco. You saw this across the nation.
Yep.
As housing became more of a significant issue as a crisis, you start to see those numbers rise. And so when it came to this project, we said, well, it's not going to get any better.
Right.
And so if we don't do something now, it's only going to be a more significant issue on down the road. So Dusty, tell us a little bit more about what exactly is Creekside Community Village. How many units? What is the community aspect? Why is that important? Why is it not just about housing? And then maybe some more about Creekside, where we're at kind of in the project.
Okay, so Creekside is 68 acres off of University Parks Drive here in Waco. When it's complete, it'll have 346 homes. We'll have a headquarters building. We'll have a welcome home center for the homeless to actually get integrated into the community. We'll have a place where we can do auto mechanics, any kind of mechanics. There'll be living rooms throughout the neighborhood where people can come and just relax and watch Super Bowl or something. And we'll have community services out there. We'll have behavioral health will be out there, Waco Family Medicine. We'll have a restorative justice community partner out there helping us with behavioral problems. We'll have several different types of substance use abuse programs going on at the village. It's just an all-inclusive gated community, and we'll have a convenience store. And anyway, so we finished the rough grading of our property. The 68 acres is long and skinny. The front half of it is buildable. The back half is in a floodplain, so we'll use that for green space and grow some fields and crops and have some animals back there. But the front half, we've graded the first phase, and this week we started our infrastructure, putting in utilities. That'll last a couple of months if the rain is kind to us. And then after that, we'll get our roads going and start putting some pads in. And we hope to have the first 40 homes built by end of the summer, something like that.
When we think about how this is modeled after Austin, Jimmy, as I've been down there a ton of times, you have as well. What was it about that model that you said, if we're going to do this, it needs to be like this?
Yeah. First of all, because Alan down there understood what we understood about the village mindset, that it is not about just putting a roof over somebody's head, because that doesn't change homelessness necessarily. But when you bring those services that Dusty talked about around it and you create community, there's accountability, and there's people have things to do that matter. And even those that are still struggling with mental health challenges, now there's services out there. And so it was this compilation of a community. And as we did the little golf cart drives around there several times, we would see the people they're happy, they enjoyed being there, they had something to do, and many of them live the rest of their life there and die there. It's not just a place to go for a few years. They're free to leave,
Yeah.
But the reality is, I think the majority of people who come out there spend those years there and ultimately die there, usually a lot younger because their lives have been so hard. But it is community. It's fellowship, and so it's healthy. It's healthy in every kind of way, mentally, spiritually, physically, and so we just saw that as what we wanted to do, and knew that was the model that would work for us.
Dusty, talk to me about your experience out at Community First. What have you loved about it? I know you've spent multiple weeks there. You've spent the night there, gotten to know a lot of the staff, and certainly a handful of the residents that are there. Talk to us about the missional model. Talk to us about why what is that, and why is that important to you for our model here?
So the village it's an amazing place. When you go into it, first thing you say is, "I could live here." It's peaceful, tranquil. A lot going on. They have movie nights. They have a lot of churches that get involved. It's a lot happening, and it's all in a good way. It's not busy. It's fun to be around, and we enjoyed it. 80% of the people that live there are former homeless, and 20% they call them missionals. And these are people that just want to be in the community, that might have a job and go on about their normal business. But as they're in the community, they interact, help with meals, help with any of the issues, mainly just love on the homeless and develop that relationship that's so important to ending homelessness for good. And it's a very successful model. We're bringing it to Waco. We hope to do the same. And one thing I notice about what goes on down there, as you first come in off the streets, if you've been on the streets for years and years, 12 years, you have a lot of bad habits and a lot of things that you're afraid of. And there's just a lot going on in your life. And when you're in an environment like that, those things just start going away all by themselves. And then when you add the mix of bringing in professionals, people that deal with behavioral health issues, or just having people around you that talk to you and you can sit down and have dinner with, all that stuff goes away. And it just the place where people that come from the streets can live happily ever after.
Well, I know one of the things I've heard Alan say over and over again, and we believe it's true here, is that, one of the leading causes of homelessness is this profound, catastrophic loss of family. And for some, it's never having family to begin with that is stable and provides a healthy environment to grow up in. The amount of trauma that exists as a child and a teenager. One of my favorite people in the world is Susan Cowley with Talitha Coombe, who does a lot of amazing work with very, very young kiddos. It's trauma-informed counseling and all kinds of different things that they do. And we got a tour, our program directors did, and there was this aha moment that all the kids that don't get that kind of treatment, they're the ones who are on our streets, and they're coming to the Meyer Center. They're coming to My Brother's Keeper. They're at the Hangar. And so the reality of that, the housing alone, because it's a profound catastrophic loss of family, that's why housing alone isn't going to solve homelessness for an individual. It has to be community. It's got to be the gap that's existed for them in their life is community. Yeah. That's what you're having to fill it with. Dusty, tell us a little bit more about how we got here, some of the people that have really helped us get to where we are as far as, architects. It wasn't just me and Jimmy and Dusty sitting around with a napkin and a piece of paper, drawing civil engineering plans. So who are some of those people that have really helped us get to where we are today?
So I'll start off with City of Waco. Back when Dylan was mayor and Bradley is still our city manager, we met with them and they were big advocates for what we were doing. Jimmy looped in Alan Graham, who kind of guided us and offered us the architect that designed their village in Austin. So we brought them on board. That was good because a lot of lessons learned. I think they're 8, maybe 9 years into that village, and they're working on their phase 3. So what you're going to see here in Waco is actually the phase 3 version of what's going on in Austin, which is great. And then we brought in a civil engineer to help us start designing and figuring it all out. And we work very closely with them. That's Walker Partners. And we one of the smartest moves that we made was bringing in an owner's rep that knows more about what we need to do than we do. So we brought in the Cummings Group, and they've been a huge asset in just helping guide us, saving us money. We're not taking shortcuts or anything like that. We're just trying to do it smart and make sure that we're being good stewards of God's money. And then we brought in H&B to do our dirt work. They're doing amazing stuff. They're the ones that are out there right now doing the infrastructure piece. And True North came in as our telecom provider. We have Encore helping us get the power going. Fitzgerald's going to help us with landscaping. So a lot of community partners helping us with it.
Yeah, and I've been real impressed with all of those individuals who, those companies that really got the mission behind what we were doing. And so it was a lot of hard decisions, a lot of planning and plotting, and maybe a little bit of panicking every once in a while. But through it all, God's faithfulness was really evident in these companies that you mentioned, because they're the expert, they know what they're doing. And I think it's important for folks to know, Dusty had a good line that, we want every person who drives out onto this property, we want their first thought to be, I would live here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kitchen is nicer than my kitchen. That bathroom is a lot nicer than my bathroom. That home is a lot nicer than my home. There's this, I think, an affirmation of dignity that is based on what we believe about humanity, that we are all created in the image of God.
Yep.
And because we are created in the image of God, we all deserve and should receive dignity, not just in how we treat people, because that's often how we think about that, but it's about the dignity of place, the dignity of home, the dignity of community that we all deserve. And that's what is going to be those elements for good that not just get people off the streets, but certainly keep people off the streets.
Yeah.
Now, in order for something to be really nice, guess what? It costs money. Everything costs money. And especially now, certainly we've seen this since COVID. I mean, just the supply chain issues that we've seen over the last few years, but just the materials alone have skyrocketed. And with inflation, things have just gotten very, very expensive. Jimmy, talk to us about some people along the way that have been sort of I call them angels, but people that have come from our community to really step up and help provide the funding to get this off the ground. We can talk about churches in a minute, but who are some of the individuals or maybe organizations or foundations that have actually made this possible to get where we are today?
One of the most important things that we've already talked about that we had to communicate is the dignity around what we're doing. It's just not another project. There's lots of good projects out there, but this was much more than that. And so as we had these professionals that Dusty talked about come together, we realized this is a network. It's a complex network of people and things and costs. So we knew the money would be an issue, and we were really good at working with people, and we had to learn how to be better at raising money.
We're good at begging.
Yes. And so we found, in particular, a man that had been, he'd been grown up hard. He was through a newspaper as a kid, and he was a work ethic kind of guy, and he was older, but he watched our work at Mission Waco, and he believed in us, and he checked us out to see that we were trustworthy. And so as he got older and began to struggle with some cancer issues, spent more and more time in this relationship with him, and he decided he wanted to make an investment in what we were doing. So he was one of those lead guys that gave us a lot of money, and was so thankful that he got to see the early stages of the plans. When he died, his son has continued to walk through this with us. So individuals have had a key part of it. The city of Waco, as Dusty mentioned, was early on, they could see the value. With affordable housing being so expensive, it's not even affordable anymore. They could see this model was even a better deal, and they checked that out as well. And so then, in the county, so as we got these people around the issue that said this is a viable approach, then we began to go out to the rest of the community, individuals and particularly churches, and began to let them know that they could buy into a model of something that was probably something they had never imagined they would be spending money on.
There have been so many individuals, it's countless names. I think we have easily over 100 individuals that have come alongside us to provide funding. Can you tell us where we're at as far as how much we've raised? How much do we have left to raise?
As best we can tell right now, we've raised $8 million. We still have $5 million to go. which feels good. That's still a lot of money to raise, but when you're looking at a project this big and that expensive, to have that much buy-in early on, and so as the project now begins to look pretty, right now you're looking at a field and all those things, but now as utilities go in and the pieces begin to come together, we know that a lot of people like to see action first before they make commitments, and so as those houses begin to go up, and as roads start to happen and the synergy of this thing begins, we're expecting and hoping for many more individuals to say, I want to be a part of that. I can do this, but I can't do that. And so this is a widening deal, but the basic structures of involvement are happening now. We're not having to wait and just beg people. It's really going on. I've been especially privileged to be a part of some of the churches and what's going on with them, because we believe as faith-based people that whole reason we started back in that dignity of God and caring about everybody and those looking through the eyes of Jesus to see how it is that we are supposed to live on earth as it is in heaven. Those people already believe that. And so most churches are strapped. There's not like they're sitting around with money in their pockets looking for something to do. And so it's a big decision. So as we begin to meet with pastors and community leaders that were in churches, they wanted to do what they could. And so we priced out different levels of housing, and churches began to say, I think we can do that. So far, I think we have 9 houses, that's correct still, that were built.
9 different designs.
Yeah, from the churches that, when we had one church that was about to build some new buildings for themselves. They said, let's start with the poor and do something for them. So they bought 3 houses.
Well, I think that church, Mosaic Church, with Pastor Slim and Pastor Malcolm, they meet in the Meyer Center on Sundays, right. And they wanted their first building campaign to be for somebody else. Yeah. And so they, at $50,000 a piece, they bought 2 homes.
2 of those.
There's a church in Connecticut that they're going to be our next episode. They're coming in a few days. Not only did they raise enough money for 3 homes at the $50,000 level, which is one of the nicer homes, but they're going to be here all next week, and they're going to build those 3 homes when they're here. Name some of the other churches.
Thank you for asking that, because I think it's important for the community to hear this. Highland Baptist Church, that's a growing church, has been very generous. They're buying 3 homes that will be right here on the front end. Church in the Bridge is our church. We're a dinky little church that's met 32 years under a bridge, and we said we can't not do this. These are our people, and so we worked it with our budget to work that in. So we bought a house. Crestview Church of Christ has bought a house. There's a church called Renew, good friend that's doing some great work over there.
Mr. Wayne.
Wayne Williams, and known him a long, long time. And then Meadowbrook Baptist Church has bought at least to pay half this year and half next year. And then Crossroads Fellowship was relatively new, and they were kind of on the edges out there. And then First Baptist Woodway has also bought a house, and they plan to do more. So the reason that's so significant is they're faith-based people with willingness to jump in early and kind of create a synergy around other people now coming in, maybe individuals in their churches that say, I'm going to do that. I got that much money, or I will do it over 3 years. So I think it's been real fun for me to see that we have led with the faith community, and we expect the rest of the community to follow along.
Yeah. So Dusty, talk to us a little bit about phase 1, because you said earlier 346 homes overall when all the phases are done. Currently right now we're just focused on phase 1. Can you tell us what exactly is in phase 1? How many homes, what buildings, and when do we think to start seeing or expect to see some of those buildings start to go up?
So phase 1 will have 40 homes, and we'll have a community bathroom and a community kitchen. One thing we didn't really make clear on is we're building these homes mostly without plumbing, so that people have to come out and be in community. It helps with the healing process. It helps with the ending homelessness process. It works real well in Austin, and we're going to copy that. So we must have a community restroom and a kitchen. The kitchen will be a place where meals are shared, and we can also have churches or any kind of group that wants to come in and be a part of it can come in and do meals and fellowship with the people that live there. That's basically all we need to get started. We hope by the end of this summer, God willing, that we will be well on our way to having that goal met.
Yeah.
If not, it shouldn't be too much longer after that, and then we'll move into some of the other facilities that we need for phase one. We want to get some green space going up front.
What's going to be in that green space, you think? Sorry to interrupt.
So we're going to have some. We're still working on that now. The landscape architect is going to come back with some recommendations. Something that is easy to maintain. We'll have a lot of native plants for our decorations. The front will be fruit, some kind of something that we can harvest that the people that live there are going to be called neighbors. So our neighbors can actually can take care of and invest in and enjoy the rewards.
Like a garden up front, you know.
Yep.
And we have 35 acres on the back for, you know, mostly the Jimmy Dorrell disc golf course.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
It's hard to play disc golf with 9 fingers or 9.5. Which at some point today you're gonna have to share that story because that's always a fun one. Dusty. So 35 affordable homes. 5 of those homes, or 5 equaling 40, then are for missional families.
Correct.
That can come live out there. I'd like to note my sister and my brother-in-law and their 4 children have lived out at Community First in Austin, I think for right about 10 years. And their oldest just graduated high school. And so I get that question a lot when I speak is, John, who's going to be crazy enough to go live out there? I'm like, well, I can tell you, that's a very normal family. They're both teachers, so they work. And their kids have grown up in this environment, and they would have chosen no other way for their kids to grow up. And they've loved it, the friendships. And I think that's what an important element of this is, that these folks that we call missionals are not just there to provide something, but they're there to build a relationship, to offer friendship. It's not just to give rides. It's not just to cook a meal or provide something. It is, you're there to build a relationship and get to know people. And I think that's just a huge aspect of not just those missionals, but the staff and the volunteers. I like to describe Mission Waco as we're board protected, staff led, but people driven. And it is what that is what drives us as an organization. The first part of our mission statement as an organization is that we empower individuals through relationship-based, faith-based programs. When you remove the relational element out of any of these programs, well, then it's just a program. And you're providing something, and it's very transactional, and it is not about friendship. And as we've learned, and I've been doing this definitely not as long as you, Jimmy, or you, Dusty, but that relational element is what people are desiring. They may not would say it that way, but they want a relationship. When I talk to people, the number one question when we go out and speak is, what do I do when somebody asks for money? And a part of that process and helping people process the answer to that is affirm dignity, whatever that looks like for you. Affirm dignity. Jimmy, as we're getting into fundraising, what's one thing that you would challenge all our listeners or churches or whoever might be listening to this? What's a challenge for them from you that you'd like to share with them?
Well, I think people can't be coerced and convinced by just talk. What we have learned through the years is because of the relationship piece, some of the best stuff we do is on the front end, where we can put you in a small van and drive you out there. We can drive you through the city and meet some of our friends. You can come to church in the Bridge. There's that next step that. Now, some people believe in us enough. They know us. They know we're trustworthy. So they may write a check and never do anything. But I think the greater community, the best work that happens is they come and get engaged, and it may be engaged with the children in the low-income apartment complexes. It doesn't have to be the homeless, but as you get out into that world that we think Jesus called us to, there's a synergy that happens, and it's like the Spirit of God just keeps moving you there. So I think that's but you got to have answers, and so you got hard questions. Well, if you don't give money, then what happens? And so all these natural questions that people have, because we've isolated these two groups separated from themselves. How do we really get past those questions to be able to engage with full support? And we can help you do that.
Dusty, what's one challenge for our listeners?
Part of my job with Mission Waco is to get the village built and get it operational. And as I'm working on the operational side of it, how we're going to operate, what we're going to do, what our programs are, what it's going to be like. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, are you going to get them jobs? Are you going to give them job training? Are you going to do things like that? And the answer is, yeah, we're going to do whatever they want. If they want to just come out and live happily ever after, that's what we're going to do for them. And if they've got an income already, they can be whoever they want to be. And we're just going to facilitate that and walk alongside them and enjoy it just as much.
So one of the biggest questions I get, I think there's an assumption when you start talking about just housing and the unhoused population, homelessness, is there's an assumption that a project like this is free for those who want to come out and live there. Dusty, talk to us about, community first in Austin, their number one rule, and how has that played out, and how will that play out with us here with Creekside Community Village?
So their number one rule is everybody pays rent. Their philosophy is if you don't have skin in it, it's going to turn into a project or something similar to that, and they don't want that, and it's worked very well for them. The rent is minimal down there. They charge between $350 and $500 a month for the homeless. You have to have income to get in, but once we get past that point, there'll be plenty of opportunities for people to work for us on site, cleaning up or doing yard work, whatever we can come up with to pay them. And I think just that, even though you're just paying rent, they feel like they own the place. And when you have that little bit of ownership, it changes people. It changes them where they don't want to do bad things. They don't want to do drugs. All those things that they experience in homelessness kind of go away by themselves just by having friends around and being in a place that they can call home.
Yep. Well, this past summer, last year, I traveled quite a bit to go put eyes on a lot of the places that we had researched and had talked to. But it's in Portland and Seattle and it's in Denver and pretty far away. So I went and traveled to these places, and almost in their entire models were based on rent being free, like not being charged rent. And you could see it. Like when people don't feel a place of permanence, they're not going to take care of. I mean, how many of us take care of the apartments that we go rent for 6 months or a year or a rundown, crummy motel? And so when it starts out as nice, there's a level of ownership, I think, that comes with that dignity being affirmed. And if it's nice, they want to keep it nice. And, point of clarification, though, with the community bathrooms, these individual centralized bathrooms are outside access only. You can't picture like a dorm. And it's just for those particular units that don't have plumbing. We will have other units that do. So for folks that need to be able to get to a bathroom quickly, they will be in those. And that's a part of the intake application process. Dusty, can you talk to us a little bit more about who qualifies to get in here? And one of the questions that I always get that's around that is the issue of safety and security. And then sort of the next question is always, what do you do about drugs and alcohol? So kind of talk to us a little bit about those elements.
Yeah, those are some big concerns from the folks that I talk to. But pretty much our folks are going to be, if you're homeless and you've been in the county for more than a year and you're over the age of 18, that's kind of our starting point. Fill out an application and we'll review it. We're going to be a low barrier to the intake process. So we're going to look at your record, your criminal record, whatever, and we're just going to make decisions based on that. We don't plan on putting up a lot of roadblocks for people that have bad records with anything. We're just going to talk to them and get to know them. A lot of the friends that I deal with currently on the streets have bad backgrounds, but I trust them and love them as much, or if not more, than the people I go to church with. So I would have them in that village in a heartbeat. So our basic behaviors is what we'll get. What we will address. We're not going to be judging you on any of the other things that go on in a normal neighborhood. As you get into trouble, then we're going to. Not only are we just going to talk to you about it, we're going to make sure that we set you up for success. We're going to point you in the right direction for on-site remedial training. We're going to make, if your problem is hoarding, we're going to have some neighbor care team that'll help you get over your hoarding. If you just have a mess outside your house, we're not going to kick you out for that. We're going to help you clean it up and show you how to keep it clean and do everything we can to make sure that you're successsul. What we learned in Austin is that after you've been on site for a year, the number one reason for people leaving is death. So people don't, we originally thought it was going to be maybe a transitional housing, but it's not. People don't want to leave, and that turns it into permanent supportive housing, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, and I think that aspect certainly lends itself to people staying for as long as possible, because when you discover real, genuine, life-giving community, then you crave that, and you don't want to go anywhere else.
Right.
But there will be a program that is a path for home ownership. We just know the reality of those who are chronically homeless. That's not necessarily a reality. It may be a dream. But for those who might go out and get very well-paying jobs, highly paying jobs, we do want them, if it's their desire, we're getting back to your point, it's what they want. If they want to live out of the community with that job, they can. But if they want to get into a home ownership, then we want to be able to have a path for them to be able to go do that, or to move into a missional role, or to move into, they're our first donors, because we'll ask anybody for money. And so, well, thank you guys for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation?
I just appreciate the widening ripple of people understanding what's going on and their excitement. I think that's the synergy of all this is really growing, and we look forward to that group, all of you, maybe taking a trip out there or meeting in a small group about questions you have, or let's just find ways to get the next level of your involvement.
One of the things I want to make sure people understand is we are here as a resource. We've got some additional volunteers and staff who would love to come to your Sunday school class and talk about this project. We'd love for you to host a dinner or come to your small group and bring your friends so they can hear more about what this is. And I think more importantly, hear the heart behind why we're doing this. We can talk a lot about what we're doing, but we want to make sure we impart the why and the heart behind it all. And that's what today was largely about, for our listeners getting to know all of us a little bit, hearing more about the project, some details about the project. Certainly, if you want to find out more, you can go to our website, Mission Waco's website. We've got a Creekside page on there. You can also follow Creekside Community Village on our social media handles. And certainly, if you're looking for additional podcasts, you can go to wherever you find your podcasts to listen to more episodes of this. You're listening to It Takes a Village, which is about Creekside Community Village, Mission Waco's newest project and development, which is a permanent supportive housing model that combines that with community engagement. And we believe that through that model, we will see people not only lifted up off the streets, but continue to stay off the streets as well. So thanks for listening in. Continue to follow this project as it develops, which we will see a significant amount of development in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and we hope you stay plugged in. Thanks for listening in. You can follow us on Creekside Community Village social handles and where you listen to your own podcasts.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.